good to know. Okay, then I'll make a start. Hello to everybody. I know not everyone has their visuals on, but as long as you can take part and I can see you on the participant list, that should be okay. Welcome to the meeting. We haven't had a meeting since December, and our meeting in March was cancelled due to COVID. And as we know, a lot has changed since then. So what we've done is pause the work programme for this meeting and for an update as to what the left has been doing basically since COVID started, which is why I've invited Katie Trout and Mike Philpott to just come and update us on what the left is now doing and the direction we're going in. So if we make a start, then have we got any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
No apologies?
There are no apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Declaration of interest. No, I can't see anybody's hands up. Okay. Questions and deputations.
There are no questions or deputations, Chair.
Thank you. So can we get straight to the minutes? Remember, these are from December, so cast your mind back.
Chair, if you can hear me, I'm happy to move the minutes so we can make progress with the substantive item.
Thank you, Councillor People. Anybody willing to second that?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. So that's carried then. Okay. So we're on to agenda item 5. And Katie Trout very kindly has offered to come on the recovery. We've all had the paper, so I hope you've had a read through. Katie, would you like to give us your take on it all? What's happened?
Katie, you're on mute. Sorry.
Apologies, I thought I'd turned that off. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, Chair. It's good to see you all this afternoon. So as I think has been the same for all of your organisations, the focus on trying to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 has been an absolute priority for GBS LEP. So the report that I've shared in advance with you tries to bring together a summary of all the activity that we've been undertaking to date. So I recognise it's quite a lengthy report, and apologies for that, but I thought you would like to have a good feel for the sort of breadth of work that we've been doing so far. I'm sure you've all read the report, so I wasn't proposing to go through it in detail. Suffice to say that it covers a number of different areas of focus for LEP. So firstly, the setting up of a recovery task force, which has given us particular focus and steer for the work that we've been doing. The next section is all around the interventions that GBS LEP has been developing and is now launched and live. Third section is all around the Growth Hub, which is our one-stop shop for business support and how we're using that to support businesses. The fourth piece all around our sector recovery plans and how we are undertaking extensive business engagement to try to develop interventions that will support businesses to both recover through COVID but also prosper going forward. Fifth section is all around the capital programme and work we're doing on that. And then the final two sections cover the West Midlands activity and also our activity on a national level as well. So there's quite a lot that's in the report, so I wasn't proposing to go through it in detail what's there, but I thought what I might do is just update you on a few other elements of activity that's happened since the report was published, just to bring you up to speed completely, and then obviously open it up for questions and comments and reflections that you might have. So first of all, I thought it might be useful just to highlight some of the recent economic stats that have been produced, which I think bring into sharp focus the real challenges we've got here in the GBS LEP economy on the back of COVID-19. So there's been a rapid growth in unemployment, with an increase in claimant count of nearly 19,000 people between April and May in the GBS LEP area, which represents a growth of 21% over that month. This picture is very much mirrored when we look at the universal credit data as well. So the provisional data for May shows an increase in 34,200 people claiming universal credit over the month. And it also shows that between February and April, there's been a fast increase of people who are claiming universal credit who are in work than those that are unemployed, which I think gives a strong indication of some of the underlying factors and challenges there will be for people who are in work through this crisis as well. The next piece of data I think is worth highlighting is around the number of people furloughed. So in the GBS area, we've got 244,000 people who are receiving furlough payments, which is 35% of the West Midlands, so 3 LEP geography total, and approximately 1 in 4 jobs within the GBS LEP area. So that's obviously a huge amount of people being furloughed. And as you'd expect, the proportion of those people, the greatest proportions very much come from the cultural economy, so hospitality sector, and also construction and retail as well. So furlough has impacted much more significantly on some sectors than others. And then the final point I just wanted to mention to you was around the latest stats on business output. So a good measure of this is the West Midlands Purchasing Manager Index. So there was this figure went to an all-time low of 10.9 in April. And if you think about these figures, normally if the figure is at or below 50, it shows a decline in output levels. So the fact it dropped all the way to 10.9 is hugely significant. That did come up to 27.9 by May 2020, but there still shows an ongoing contraction of output by over 50% since February. So still, although it's an improving picture, it's still a very challenging one. So kind of giving that sort of somber introduction, really, as you can see from the report, GBS LEP has developed a number of different interventions as well, which are outlined in the report, which I won't go through in detail now, but I just wanted to give you the latest figures from the campaign that we've been undertaking. So to date, over 300 businesses have approached us now for support from those interventions, so which we're very pleased about, and 200 businesses have been referred to the various interventions that have been outlined in the report for you as well. So while this is a solid start, we think there's a lot more that can and should be done to help to get the message out to a much wider range of businesses. So we've looked particularly at the geographical spread. And actually, whilst there's been a strong uptake in Birmingham and Solihull, and actually in southern Staffordshire, it's been far weaker in North Worcestershire. So we are working closely with the local authorities there, the Growth Hub, and other partners to try to see if we can increase the number of businesses from that area that are coming forward. We're also, in terms of the sector spread, we've had very strong number of applicants from the manufacturing sector, business, financial and professional services, etc. But actually we've had far fewer than expected from life sciences and low carbon. So we are trying to do what we can to target those sectors in particular, but it might show that the interventions aren't specific and tailored enough for those sectors. So we might need to do some work to adapt them, and we're looking into that as well. And we've also had a lower uptake on retail than we would have hoped too. So this might not be partly surprised because the Growth Hub has traditionally not worked so much with the retail
lady and a group of people at the bottom.
Sorry, what was that?
Okay, no, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I think I'm in.
Bye. So we need to be doing some more work given the amount of interventions that are supporting the retail sector as well, because I think that's clearly really important that we access as many of those businesses as we can. So the next stage of the campaign, as mentioned in the report, is very much about offering much more targeted support. So both for the specific interventions, for specific sectors, and also for particular geographies as well. And any thoughts that you have on how we can best link into businesses in your area will be greatly appreciated too. In terms of some updates on the Growth Hub, we referred to the recruitment that we're undertaking in the report. That is all progressing well, and we're hoping to complete that recruitment by September, which will mean that we'll have a much higher number of very experienced account managers who can work directly with businesses, focused on particular sectors, but also on growth and resilience as well, which will be really important in the current climate. And then the final bit is we've had some very recent updates from government around a new grant scheme that they are hoping that growth hubs can operate. So this would be one funded by European Regional and Development Funding, and it would be targeted specifically at SMEs and giving them grants of between £1,000 and £3,000 that they can then use to procure professional services support. So this is something that should be made available to all growth hubs in the near future. We just are waiting for ministerial sign-off for it. And then we as GBS LEP and the Growth Hub will need to work through how best we get that funding to businesses, what the sort of eligibility criteria and everything is as well. That grant funding will need to progress fairly quickly, because I think it all needs to be allocated by January and all spent by March next year. So obviously there'll be quite a quick turnaround, and obviously relatively small amount of grant funding available, but clearly that amount of money should be very helpful to both the businesses themselves, but also to the professional services firms that I'm sure will benefit from the additional work coming their way. And the final bit of update I just wanted to give was around the national activity as well. So I mentioned in the report around the fact that we've already hosted one ministerial round table here in the Midlands. Well, actually, there's another one which is now being planned for the 23rd of July as well. That will also be attended by Minister Zahawi, and Tim Pyle, as GBS LEP's chair, will chair that meeting. It's going to have a focus on 3 policy areas that government have set of levelling up, net zero and investment. And the government has also asked for there to be a sectoral focus around advanced manufacturing, engineering and professional business services, digital support as well. So we are just working with our other 8 LEPs in the Midlands Engine area to come together with a list of businesses to put forward for that round table. But I think the fact that there is a second one shows the benefit that government finds of kind of having these round tables with business leaders and the role that LEPs can play in helping to convene them. So I will just pause there, and I hope you managed to catch at least some of what I said. I picked up there was quite a bit of interference and perhaps not being able to hear everything. So if you would like me to repeat anything, then please let me know, but very much welcome any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you very much, Katie. Very sorry for this. I think some members were unmuted at one time, and I think we have some interference and your voice is coming through. So I hope you're okay. I was going to ask a couple of questions. One was about how you were working with Combined Authority in West Midlands. The mayor thought all that the government could possibly give us at this point. I know you've alluded to it in the report, but would you just like to expand on that for a minute?
So yes, so we're working very closely with both the Combined Authority, but also the other 2 LEPs in the make up the Combined Authority as well. So Black Country LEP and Coventry and Warwickshire LEP, and we're doing that on a number of levels. So, for example, the work that we're doing around sectors. We as GBS LEP lead on 5 sectors for the West Midlands, and Black Country and Coventry and Warwickshire and the West Midlands Growth Company lead on the other key sectors. So we're working very closely together as we develop those sectoral recovery plans. We are then have also been very much engaged with the various groupings set up at a West Midlands level to help drive the economic recovery, including the Mayor's Economic Impact Group. And we've been working very closely with them in developing the submission that went into government recently, which was the Recharging the West Midlands document. So this was a sort of £3.2 billion allocation, request, if only it was an allocation, request for money from government for various interventions that would help kickstart the West Midlands economy. So we were played a key role in that, in terms of trying to put forward various interventions that could be included, and also try trying to make sure that what was produced was a stronger representation of the needs and opportunities across the area as possible. So, for example, the Pivot and Prosper programme that Mike's going to talk about later is one of the elements as part of that recharge document, as are some of the key projects that we've been working on, like those related to the Life Sciences Park in Birmingham as well.
Thank you. We had agreed beforehand to put your hand in front of your face if you wanted to raise a question, but as I can only see half of you, I'm not sure that's going to work. So could you raise your hand using the participant part, and I can see you.
Hodgson, Chair, is indicating.
Okay, Councillor Hodgson then.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the apprenticeship triage service and the employment triage service. In terms of the apprenticeship, has that actually started in practice? And the other point about the employment triage, if we have people who are unemployed as a consequence of the situation, how do we signpost them to take advantage of that service?
So both of those are up and running, Councillor Hodgson. So we can access both through the Step Forward campaign portal. So I'm very happy to share that website with you, or else there are direct links to both of the apprenticeship triage service and the employment triage service as well. So I'm very happy again to share those with the committee so that you've got all of those details and can pass them on. I think it's fair to say that we've had to date less interest in both of those services than perhaps we thought we might, although that probably could be taken as a good thing in some senses, that people not needing the support. But I think really particularly the apprenticeship one, having talked to a number of organisations who are also dealing with apprentices, I think a lot of companies are waiting to see what latest government guidelines are around redundancies and various things before taking some decisions. So we are expecting the need and interest for both of those services to increase, sadly, quite significantly. So we can continue to promote those so that people know the service is out there if and when they need it. The big gap we've got at the moment is we haven't actually had any individual apprentices apply through that service. So we've had providers and we've had businesses who've been keen on recruiting apprentices, which is clearly very positive. But what we need to make sure the message is getting out to the people who are already partway through an apprenticeship. If there's something changes with that they know they can get some advice and support. So part of that, I'm sure, is because the usual GBS-LEP networks probably don't include many apprentices. So we have been trying to work with the sorts of organisations who would more naturally engage with people who are on apprenticeships and younger people in particular, to try to make sure that we can communicate as effectively as we can and get the message out. So again, if you've got any suggestions of groups in your area where you think which you think would be good for us to kind of engage with, then please do let me know, because we'd be very happy to hear that and to pick those up.
That's okay, Councillor Hodgson?
Yes, thank you very much.
I believe Councillor Hart had a question. Councillor Hart, can you hear me? So can we move to Councillor People then?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I presume you can hear me. Hello?
Yes, I can.
All right. I wasn't sure if Paul had been able to unmute me. Basically, thank you very much for the report. I thought the range of interventions was the key to success, because so often these things have all been driven by one good idea and leave out others. So I was really pleased, Katie, to see just how many different things we're trying. With regard to your last point about apprenticeships, in Tamworth we found that operating the council services via Facebook has brought in a lot of younger residents, and it may be that it's highlighting to apprentices on, the media they might use, that might bring more of them individually forward. But I think a lot of them will be waiting on their employers to know, whether they're all right or not. Obviously in Tamworth yesterday we had our John Lewis shut. So what does worry us is the number of people whose jobs are currently being evaluated. I know people locally who've been told they'll be redundant when furlough ends. I know somebody who's on the one shift at JLR that have been called back. The other two shifts are not currently needed. So I think it's this being ready for any major companies. And, it would have been much nicer if John Lewis had announced that they'd already been speaking to people like yourselves about helping people find alternative employment. So I think maybe a message out to the big employers: look, we know you may have some nasty decisions to make, but could you please have us on board from day one rather than waiting to ask us once you've made the announcement? That might help. But overall, a very successful set of interventions so far, I think.
Thank you, Councillor People, and certainly, what we've picked up is the same around Facebook. So it's good to hear that that's a particularly useful mode of communication for you in Tamworth. So we are running a number of adverts on Facebook, and we're trying to make those more targeted now to reach like young people and things, because like you would think that's probably a good means of doing so. I too absolutely share your concerns around when furlough finishes. I think, the figures I mentioned just at the start in terms of 244,000 people being on furlough in the GBS LEP area, even if it's just a proportion of those that are sadly made redundant, that is a significant amount of people who will be losing their jobs within the next few months. And particularly if, the figures that we have show that the majority of those are people working in the hospitality sector, we know that those industries will not have picked up to the level that they were before when furlough ends. So actually you would imagine many of those would sadly end up losing their jobs. I think, you're absolutely right that we need to be as prepared as we can. So although these triage services aren't being as well used as perhaps we thought they might be now, I think I'm still absolutely clear we need to make sure people are aware that they're there, so that if the time comes, they know where to go to. And I think you're right about, reaching out to those bigger employers, and certainly I would hope that we can start to do that in partnership very much with the affected local authorities and with the combined authority as well.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, can I just ask Katie whether it would be appropriate, if you wouldn't mind, if you could contact local councils, because I know that our local council, when we had our corporate scrutiny meeting a couple of weeks ago, we were talking, very sort of straightforwardly. The leader was answering questions. And we were looking at something like a 1.8 million deficit this year. Now that sounds tiny when you think of the big numbers, but for us, that's probably about 20% of our disposable income, the amount of money that we can budget for rather than is payments through and so on. So I would think that a lot of councils are having to look very hard at their own workforces. And I think it would be good if the LEPs could talk to councils about potential losses in those sectors as well. I think it's easy at the moment to see us as the people who are helping, which we are, but in practice we're also significant employers. And I don't think our situation is terribly different to anyone else's. We've had to spend somewhat more on COVID, or we've lost more revenue than the money that's come in to compensate. So I would urge a bit of early sort of conversations about potential dropouts there as well.
very happy to do that. We are kind of in regular dialogue with all the local authorities on a wide range of matters, including all the sort of impacts of COVID-19. Hadn't particularly picked up with them on the point that you've made to council people around potential challenges and what that means for your workforces, but obviously very happy to do so.
I was going to ask a question, if you don't mind. The recovery of the scrutiny function, the task force terms of reference, so how is that going to fit with the GBS lab function? How do you see the two working?
So I think it's quite different roles in a sense. So the recovery task force is all about kind of providing the sort of the steering of the decision making of the LEP around COVID activity and the decision making as well, particularly in between board meetings, etc. So I think the point around the scrutiny piece was more that they do get regular updates, for example, on the progress of the interventions and how those are performing and the sort of the comms campaign, etc. that we're doing. They do scrutinise those and they do challenge and they do give advice, guidance, steer and decision about what we need to do next. So it's a sort of more of a, I suppose, executive scrutiny piece rather than the role that you're playing here as well. But I thought it was useful in the report just to mention that so that you were aware that there was we were getting as an executive appropriate kind of challenge and questioning about what we're proposing as well on a regular basis. So I think you're on mute, Chair.
So any more questions for Katie at this point? We will hear from her later in the private session. We need to note the resolution. So can I have somebody to propose and second it, please?
Propose, Chairman.
This is just noting the recommendation.
Yes, happy to propose the recommendation.
Yeah, I'll second that.
We lost our Democratic Services host.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, it's Paul Rogers. So members have moved the recommendations, and I take it just to note 2.2 of the report. Ask for comments on the work and proposals and additional activity the LEP's undertaking. Is that has the Joint Scrutiny Committee fully considered the report at this point? On mute, Chair.
Can we move on to the next item? Okay, I move to agenda item 6 then. Who's Sally Agas on Enterprise Zone? Is Sally there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am here. I hope you can hear me clearly. Yes, this is a report. I asked to note 3 items. The first item I'd like to report on is the Outturn financial position of the Enterprise Zone model. Members will recall that we have a funding model behind this that is a very prudent model and is based on the fact that we include all expenditure per approved project, but we do not include the business the business rate uplift until they are actually on site. So it is a prudent model, and based on that prudency, we were at the end of Q3, we were forecasting that there would be an accumulated deficit of 2 million for this year, for 2021, for 1920 and 2021. We now happily report at the end of the financial year that accumulated deficit position is now a surplus of 3.5 million. This has happened because on the Smithfield site, which I think you will be aware of, we were due to do some demolitions, which would have meant a loss of business rates. Now, those demolitions, for a variety of reasons, have not happened, and therefore the business rates have continued to be collected. So the position, the capital position at the end of 1920, taking in the contingency sum, shows a surplus for the next 2 years, which is a good position to be in. Members will recall that we use the funding model very much to determine the prudential borrowing needed for from our accountable body, Birmingham City Council, but it is also used by the LEP as an affordability tool, so that as a new project comes forward through the system for approval at outline business case and full business case, we are able to interrogate the model and to ensure that the model can actually afford the level of investment requested. And that is quite an important point. And I'm happy to pause as we go along, Chair, on each point I've asked members to note. So that is the summary position of 1920. Shall I pause and take any questions on that position or move on?
I think move on if you don't mind.
Of course. In terms of COVID impact, we had, of course, anticipated that there would be quite a bit of prolongation of projects within the EZ programme, and that there might also be some on costs. We have had some prolongation notifications. However, force majeure applies, and any prolongation under the contract is at the cost of the contractor. However, we have had some exceptional costs for COVID related, which we have agreed to, but only on one project, which is a good position. And that project was Paradise Phase 2, whereby we anticipated there would be problems in importing some steel beams from Sweden. So we agreed to pay upfront for those steel beams to enable them to be shipped and stored, so that the government lifted the construction site COVID restrictions. There would be no further prolongation. So we did agree to that, but overall we are not facing any major COVID cost overruns. And I'm not saying that will never happen, because of course we are still in the middle of, well, towards the end, hopefully, I've got my fingers crossed under the table, that we will not have this second spike, that construction sites will continue unabated. I can't categorically say that will be the case, but at the moment we have only seen a very small cost overrun on our EZ budget. So I think that is a better position than we had originally thought when the lockdown happened and everybody went off site. In terms of point 3 that I ask members to note, that is in relation to the EZ funding model. Programme Delivery Board and the LEP Board considered and agreed that a enterprise zone EZ management subgroup would be formed, and that the terms of reference of that group would be to ensure that the governance and the funding model was fit for purpose in these changing times. We have addressed in some detail now the funding principles behind the funding model, and we are just in the process of approving some new funding principles, one of which I think I illustrated in the report, Chair, which was that anticipate an increase in business rate appeals. The reason being that those tenants currently in occupation are very conscious of the fact that the surrounding area in some cases is not as it was promised to be, and is still a building site in one case because of COVID and other delays on schemes. Under those circumstances, they are entitled to a business to claim business rate rebate, and we are therefore being very cautious in our approach and are increasing the business rate appeal contingency from 5% to just under 10%. That is prudent. We have also looked at some other contingencies, and we have also said that in terms of the contingencies that we have agreed, they will be reviewed now on a 6-month basis. And if there is an accumulation of funding in a contingency, we will bring that back into the funding model to be applied to projects. Previously, that review was on an annual basis. We are saying that as it is very much a programme with a lot of moving parts, that it is very expedient to proceed in a cautious basis. What the change in the funding principles have allowed us to do is, as a project comes forward for approval for EZ funding, based on the new funding principles, we are able to run scenarios through the model that says whether a project is affordable. And we now get a confirmation of affordability as part of our report to Programme Delivery Board. I think that's a very good step forward because it does enable us to ensure that we are not running into a position where we cannot take major projects forward. I will happily pause there. I'm happy to bring further reports back to this committee as the EZ management subgroup addresses and makes recommendations, but at the moment I'll pause there, Chair, and invite questions. I'm sorry, Chair, you're on mute. I can't hear.
Now.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, I was just saying thank you very much. I thought that was very comprehensive outline of what you're doing. It seems very tightly constrained to me. Questions? Anybody? Nobody I can see is indicating. Can you just indicate a bit loud if you want to speak?
Councillor Chris, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Chris, thank you.
Yes, for your complete report. I was just wondering, after the completion of the development of the enterprise zone, has there been any changes of the model of the take-up of the business spaces? Because obviously any projection of that take-up was pre-COVID, and now looking forward, a lot more businesses are looking at working from home, and I just wondered if that had been taken into consideration.
That is a matter that's been under discussion, particularly on our major schemes like Paradise Phase 1 and Phase 2. We have a projected 92% occupancy rate on Phase 1 and 2, but we are in discussion with those tenants who have not yet completed the tenancy agreements, because we are very conscious of the situation that, you know, there's a couple of scenarios which, as I said, we have been putting through the model. So there is the scenario that says, now don't take it up at all. There is the scenario that says they want space, less space than what they had anticipated. And interestingly, one of the things that has come through loud and clear to us is they do not want the number of car park spaces. So one tenant in particular, because they were taking 2 floors, were entitled to 20 spaces, have said, we don't want 20, we only want 2 spaces. So that is a change that we think will continue as tenants reflect on their position, and certainly with a view to them saving and cutting costs.
I understand that, and I think going forward that's very, very positive. But my other concerns are that also going forward there are people who are unhappy with taking on public transport as it has previously been because of COVID. So I think it is all a moving model, and we just have to wait and see what does transpire. But it is very difficult at the moment to know what people will do. But thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to ask a question?
I think Councillor Kiss has
Cox,
started.
Chair. Councillor Cox, Chair.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a comment that I've got really. There is a concern in many ways that the new practices in business that might come out of COVID, and obviously from wanting like 20 car parks to 2, it is very obviously dependent that there's a reconciling that everybody is going to be happy working from home. I'm not too sure for the health and well-being of people that working from home is necessarily going to be the right way forward, while businesses may take the opportunity to obviously cost cut. And I think there needs to be a preparation involved, that actually that might be a very short-term, ill-conceived view on how to employ people. I'm convinced that you know, that we may find ourselves doing that change of view, because I know for a fact there are staff at Lichfield District Council are on board with working from home, but there is an urge, welcome, to return to office environment. And I think we could find ourselves in a very difficult situation if we thought that the reduction of office work to home work is going to be the way forward. I think it's going to be detriment, and if we don't not careful, if we haven't made ourselves plans for that reverse, then we're going to find ourselves in all sorts of problems. That's really my comment to add on it, Chairman.
If I may just complete the story of the car park, when after COVID, the discussions were going on about the reduction in the number of car park spaces needed. There was then question over, well, if the space is not to be used for car park, what can it be used for instead? So we were looking to progress a couple of ideas. At the last meeting, we decided that it was better to hang fire, not progress any alternative uses for the car park space, in light of the fact that people are very, very reluctant to use public transport at the moment. and in light of the fact that you are quite right, Councillor Cox, there is this desire to have the social interaction that an office environment provides. So we are a little bit in the wait and see game at the moment. And as I said, I'm happy to bring further reports back as matters develop, Chair.
Sally.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question?
Chair.
Hello?
Hello. Councillor people, may I? Thank you. Just to say that I think one of the, I take Councillor Cox's point, but I think at the moment we're also seeing a lot of people who are finding it easier to combine family responsibilities and other things. And certainly we were saying at Tamworth Council that, you know, given the volume of universal credit and other applications that's risen, we're managing with an empty building very well. So we'll have to see how many people are desperate to get back around the office cooler and so on. But all I'm concerned about is that the employers will drive this, and the employers will see it as a major opportunity to save costs. And I worry that
Hello, Council. Are you still there? We seem to have lost Councillor people for the while. Sally, is there anything you wanted to add? No, I think we'll have to leave it there then.
Councillor People's actually left the meeting.
Has he left? Okay. Well, in that case, I can thank Sally Gas for a report. We need to note the recommendations. So is somebody willing to just propose and second that?
Councillor Hart, Chair, for all three recommendations.
Thank you. Does anybody want a second?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sally. You're welcome to stay for the meeting if you want, but of course you can leave other things to do.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other items on the agenda for me, so I think the less people on the call, the less interference, so it probably is as well if I leave. Thank you all. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Goodbye then. Councillor People, do we have you back?
Yeah, I've just managed to get back in, so thank you for understanding that. As I say, my main concern is the business model was based on rate uplift, and you know, by all accounts, that's going to be very hard to achieve. So we shall hope that things work out, but I have my concern that the model is going to find itself going through some lean times at the moment, but we hope not. Thank you for bringing me back in.
Okay. Sally's now gone, but I'm sure she heard most of your comments. Okay, we're going to move on now to the Prosper with Mike Foucault. So Mike, are you there?
Hi Chair, yes I'm here.
Yes. Would you like to give your report?
Yes, thank you. So further to the paper that's been circulated, I just wanted to highlight a few key points this afternoon and then provide you all with a current update in terms of where we're up to with the Pivot and Prosper Grant Fund. But I suppose to begin with, we'll just cast our minds back a few months ago to when COVID first hit, and just to set the scene, as a LEP, we were looking at a significant amount of economic analysis, and based on all of the analysis that we was receiving in terms of how the economy was going to be affected, it was decided that any support that we as a LEP and our partners can do to mitigate business closure as a result of COVID must be a priority for the coming months and years ahead. And as a result of that, at the May LEP board meeting, directors approved an outline proposal for a pilot SME grant programme, which would look to utilise £2 million from the SEP Enabling Fund. At the same meeting, the directors also agreed to delegate the authority to the GBS LEP Recovery Task Force to oversee the final details of the programme. So following on from that meeting, the task force were then given the opportunity to provide weekly scrutiny into the development of the programme. And as such, the fund was then launched on the 18th of June, and it's now currently open for applications until 5 p.m. next Friday, so the 17th of July. If you're not that familiar with it, as a pilot, the programme intends to work with a minimum of 50 businesses, offering matched grants of between £20,000 to £40,000. The minimum match funding required from an organisation is set at a relatively modest 25% of the total project cost. And the programme is targeted at supporting high growth SMEs from the LEP's key sectors. The programme's main aim is to support SMEs that can evidence a plan to change their pre-COVID business model. Applicants are required to then demonstrate a clear proposal that can illustrate how pivoting their business will help them adjust to the new ways of working, build resilience, increase employment, and lead to growth in productivity. Prior to launching the fund, officers within the LEP conducted a review to evaluate what alternative options were available at that particular time. And obviously, following the outbreak of COVID, there were several national large-scale government interventions that were deployed. However, these tended to focus on very much short-term survival. Locally, there was not a grant fund in existence that addressed the impact of COVID on a medium to long-term basis that offered support to organisations to look to actually adapt their pre-COVID business model. The main reason, therefore, in recommending that this intervention went ahead was the fact that in the context of the LEP's business plan, Pivot and Prosper supports the LEP's goal of providing effective support for businesses across the region. Furthermore, the programme's outputs are centred around job safeguarding and job creation, again, a critical thing to happen right at the moment. It's worth just making you aware that in respect of the development and launch of the programme, several aspects have been scrutinised both internally and by our partner organisations. As I mentioned earlier, the design and the development of the fund was closely overseen by the Recovery Task Force, and their feedback in respect of designing the grant process was that an underlying rationale should be to focus a conscious commitment to deliver a programme at speed. And to say it was a hectic time is putting it mildly. We developed this within a 2 to 3 month window. And the focus was to really reduce the complexity that some grant programmes can have, because we wanted to have a positive impact to the economy. We wanted to do something that made a difference right now. So in addition to the task force, we also receive significant support from our local authority partners, particularly those that work within the economic development teams. They were actively engaged in helping us to shape some of the core principles of what this programme should be looking to work with. In addition to those, colleagues from the combined authority also fed in, looking specifically at some of the innovation principles that the fund looks to support. And linked with that, Innovate UK, which is a national organisation, they provided significant support in helping us to develop the actual grant process and what we would consider to be an eligible project, again with a focus on kind of innovation and looking to pivot one's existing business model. Furthermore, the LEPS Innovation Sub-Board were also informed of the outline proposals at the meeting that they had in May, and did provide some constructive scrutiny into how the programme is targeted and the type of organisations we should be looking to engage with. And finally, Aston University have a representative on the Recovery Task Force, and they kindly provided some pro bono support for us for when we come to look to do an evaluation of this programme. That they supplied a bespoke theory of change model, which will be the cornerstone of how we look to evaluate it from March 2021 and onwards. So just to kind of summarise some of the key implications of the programme to date are the fact that £2 million from the SEP Enabling Fund has been ring-fenced to support this. And since the launch of the fund on the 18th of June, the GBS Lab Growth Hub has been inundated with requests for business support and further information. And I'll now just provide you a little bit of a current update in terms of where we are. So to date, the Growth Hub has now received 99 inquiries for this fund. And of those, following some initial eligibility checks, 80 organisations have since received a full diagnostic from the Growth Hub and been sent all of the information and invited to apply for the fund. The quality of project proposals that have been articulated to the Growth Hub so far have been largely of very high standard. Businesses are clearly demonstrating a high degree of innovation and ingenuity as they plot their routes out of the COVID crisis and hopefully back towards a more profitable growth trajectory. So far, manufacturing and business professional services have dominated from a sector point of view, but there has been a positive response also from the creative industry sector. The type of projects that organisations are coming forward with range from straightforward capital investment into equipment to enable the business to develop new products or enter new markets, through to improving automation, increasing efficiency. There's also been a significant amount of digital focused projects that have come forward, again with the move for people operating more remotely and how to pivot their business model to reflect that. I think it's fair to say that overall this programme has demonstrated that the LEPS region's businesses are very resilient and determined, above all else, to look for opportunities that can help and support them in their continued growth. And I can also let you know that as of this morning, we've now received 10 formal applications for grant funding. And on average, the grant request is £25,000 so far. The deadline to submit applications is next Friday at 5 p.m. And following the feedback we've had from colleagues at the Growth Hub, we are expecting a significant number of formal applications to come in over the next week. And final point just to make is that the Pivot and Prosper Grant Fund certainly does have potential to be scaled up or extended. It was always done as a pilot, but what we would like to say is that subject to any additional funding sources being identified, we would like to continue this in the future. And we've already had some discussions with partners. And as Katie mentioned earlier on, it has what was one of the suggestions put forward in the West Midlands Recharge proposal. So hopefully that was a helpful overview of the work that we've been doing to date on this programme. I'll pause now and happy to answer any further questions. You're on mute at the moment, Chair.
Am I off now?
You are, yes.
I had my finger down on it instead of letting go. Sorry about that. So I'm glad you put some flesh on the bones, because I thought the outcome seemed rather undefined, and I'm interested to know more about this theory of change model of evaluation, because although 2 million doesn't seem a lot of money, we really need to make sure it goes to the right people. So what is the theory of change model?
Okay, so in terms of the outputs and outcomes of the programme, it was really centred around job creation, job safeguarding. They're kind of the big ticket items, if you like. But what the key to this fund was about how we target organisations that we feel actually can adapt what they're doing. Do they have a kind of credibility about them as an organisation to be able to steer the ship in a totally different new way to be able to grow? And the theory of change model really just looks at the wider outcomes that would have. So what would be the additional benefits of that organisation continuing to grow to the wider economy? And that's some of the way that we've looked to kind of evaluate some of those programs that we've been having. But I can certainly send some further information to you on that, if that would be of use to you, Chair.
I think that might be quite interesting. Yeah, thank you. Questions from the floor, as it were? Anybody wanting to ask a question?
If I may come in, Chair.
Yes,
Council people. Thank you. Can I say, Mike, I think this was one of the most exciting projects I saw coming forward, because the idea of helping existing good businesses to keep going is with their current workforces was lovely, and I think it really is very, very important. And well done on getting it out and getting it done so quickly. My one caveat would be to make sure that we are preserving jobs by checking that the projects that get approval are not all about automating people out of jobs. So I had some years in manufacturing and I've some idea of what it can mean. So that's my only caution, just check that we aren't negating the original concept. I mean, we may always lose some, but it's just avoiding that being the easy route to paying for automation. But I'm really delighted with the Hunt project, and the focus of it is, I think, just right and very well done.
Okay, do you want to come back on that?
Just thank you for that feedback. It's very nice to hear, actually. And yeah, totally take the point about that there is always a worry about, as things move towards automation, is there a risk to losing a job at the end of that? So far, I would say that's not come across in any of the proposals that we've seen, but it's certainly a point that we'll note.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Cox?
Chairman. Yes, like Councillor People, I'm very encouraged with the report, and certainly echo his concerns that regarding to employment. I just wanted to ask the question in terms of the geographical response. The response that we've had so far has been across our area as best as possible with regards to obviously applicants making those applications. You can't force people, obviously, but is there a good geographical response to the current uptake?
Yes, there has been a good response. I think it is though quite clear to see that Birmingham and Solihull have had the majority of responses sent back to us so far. But we have seen representation across all of the regions. So from that perspective, we are pleased. At one point, not long after we launched it, we did kind of North Worcestershire side of things. We were a little bit low on inquiries from them, so we actually increased the localised marketing that we did to try and improve that. And I'm pleased to say the number of inquiries from that part of the world has since gone up. But it is fair to say that at the moment, it's the majority of interest is from Birmingham, Solihull, and Cannock Chase as it stands at the moment. And at a later date, I'd be very happy to provide that in more of a visual format so that you can see how the spread of interest has come through to us, if that would be of use.
That would very much please, Mike. Thank you very much.
Anybody else then? No, I can't see anybody. So, Councillor Chris.
Thank you very much. I was looking at the various measures, and I'm surprised that it was generate the creation of only 50 full-time jobs. I thought it would be hopefully a minimum of 50 full-time jobs, because looking at 50 businesses, I'm sure that the way that they are going to have to pivot and prosper would have allowed for the creation of more than 50 jobs.
I think that's a very fair observation. I think what my answer to that is we were probably quite modest in how we projected what they could be. This was very much a pilot in a very unpredictable time at the moment in the economy. So we would rather underplay that than not. And what also we didn't want to do was put organisations off from coming to us, because if they felt they would only be supported if they could just create some new jobs, when actually they want to retain their workforce and pivot into a totally new way, then it might be more of a safeguarding story that they have to say rather than a new job creation. But what I will say is what we found so far has been a blend of both. There's been safeguarding and there has been some new job creation that's come forward. So, you know, the information we've had so far, I would be confident that that would be exceeded, that figure of 50 that we've put on that.
Good. I'm pleased with that, because if sometimes if you just push the boundaries of going for these grant funding percentages, then often it will allow the CEOs of the various companies or the business owners to just look at the greater picture of things, because they need to just aim for something to get that money, and it gives them an incentive. And I'm always looking at trying to give incentives if somebody's going to be getting some money out of it.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Anybody else? No, to close then. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Can I have somebody to propose and second that we note the recommendation? Councillor Cox, I can see. Councillor Chris, thank you very much. Okay, Mike, thank you. If you can stay if you want, or you can leave if you have to do other things on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. I shall leave you to it and wish you all a happy weekend.
Okay then. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, that brings us to agenda item 8, which is the work programme. Can I call on the Democratic Services Officer, Paul Rogers, just to take us through this? I think it's mostly pages 4 and 5.
Through you, Chair, yes, just to endorse what you've stated there. Really, I'd advise members to look to the next meeting in September. There's obviously capacity within that meeting as it stands for further reports to be brought forward, and it's really for members to direct what they'd like to see at that meeting in September. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Because we missed the whole of March, so we missed all the end of year reports, and Paul's marked them in red there. I'm not sure there's any point in bringing any of those back at this stage. We just need to make sure that in September we've got sufficient items that are relevant. That's why I asked Katie for clarification earlier, and it seems to me, I could be wrong, that if we keep to our programme, which was going up to March 21, we don't need to add anything new in at this stage. I just wondered what people thought and whether we should just accept it as it is. And if you're happy to leave it to Paul and I to finalise the agenda, that would be okay. Councillor Cox.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I was just wondering whether we should have just for noting in terms of an update on the COVID situation in terms of recovery. It's just wise to be because it's moving all the time, isn't it? And to just have a brief report at our next meeting on COVID recovery, I think it might be helpful. I don't know whether other members think the same, but I just thought it would be worth noting.
Thank you. I'm getting a thumbs up from Councillor Hodgson. Do you want to speak?
Certainly look forward to a further update in the autumn.
Okay, I think that's agreed. I think it would be very helpful. As you say, it's a very fast-moving situation. I can understand if Katie can't come to every meeting, but if we could have somebody significant to come and talk to us, that would be great. So are people happy then to leave it to Paul and myself and the Vice Chair to finalise the agenda for September, because things are moving so quickly still. We won't be able to do it until sort of early September at the most. Do we need a resolution on that, Paul?
Chair, as long as members are happy for us to liaise with them and obviously progress to a point where there's a definitive agenda for September. If members are agreeable, I'll note it as such. Thank you.
Okay then. Do I take it that's noted?
I'll note it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've now finished the public part of the meeting, and we're going to go into private session. I've got here the meeting is not open to the public during discussion of the following item because the report contains exempt information as defined in Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. So if we do have any members of the public watching, or we do have any members who shouldn't be here, could they please leave now? I'll hand over to Paul Rogers a second in case there's anything